Hello, everybody, and welcome back into another playoff series preview here at the Hockey Raiders. Here we're going to be talking about the Boston Bruins and Carolina Hurricanes matchup again that just got finalized last night. It seems like all of them seem to have got right down to the wire, and we didn't know until the final, game of the season. But yeah, here we are, Boston and Carolina. I've got a couple writers here from each team. Scott Roche, who's the Boston Bruins. He's an editor here as well. Welcome, Scott. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
And we also got Brandon Stanley, who covers the Carolina Hurricanes. How are you doing? And thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing great. Looking forward to talking a little hockey here. Thanks for having me.
All right. So yeah, let's get into it. Just looking at the season series, it's pretty lopsided. The Hurricanes were 3-0, outscored Bruins 16-1. It was a pretty lopsided statistics. Hurricanes were 5 for 12 on the power play. The Bruins scored their only goal on the power play. They're 1 for 14. So, I mean, look at these stats. Let's start with that. We'll start with you, Scott, on this. Do you think it's going to be this lopsided? I mean, it's a pretty bad stat to see going into this series. Do you think the Bruins are that outmatched, or is it just numbers and just how they played in the regular season?
I will say the last two meetings in Boston, it did seem like they were outmatched by the Hurricanes. Do I think it's going to be like that in the series? No. The Bruins in some of the games in the second game when they lost 6-0 did not have Bergeron, who was out injured, and Marchand was serving his 6-game suspension. It was right in the middle of that. So they'll obviously be in the series. But I don't see it going that way, but I'm interested to see how the Bruins respond, especially after the struggles they had in April. If they carry those struggles over in April, then it might be a quick series. The power play struggled, the PK struggled, and basically putting the puck in the net, they struggled. And if they struggle like that against Carolina, I don't see it going more than maybe 5 games.
Yeah, I mean, going to the other side, Brandon, you've got the team that dominated in the season series. Do you think it's going to go that way? Is Carolina that much better offensively and defensively? It seemed like they were just world beaters in that series.
Sure. But I mean, like Scott said, Boston was going through a lot of changes at that time. And actually, Tuukka Rask, one of his last games was that 6-0 win, I believe. And I think he allowed 5 goals in the first period or something like that. And shortly after that, he retired. So obviously, Boston's a much different team at this point. They added Hampus Lindholm, kind of shore up their blue line. And I definitely think, as experienced as the Bruins are, it's going to be a fight.
Yeah, I mean, it probably will. I mean, season series don't always reflect of what's going to go in the playoffs because everything's changed. It depends on when those games were played. Like you said, Bergeron and Marchand were in that game, one of the games. So, it could go differently. Let's look at that. I mean, Boston has always had that ridiculous top line, the perfection line with Marchand, Bergeron, and Pasternak. Bergeron's been pretty good lately. He just scored his 400th, I believe, in the NHL. So, there's been talk that he could retire and probably wants to maybe win a cup before then, another one. Look at the matchup of that line compared to the high-powered offense that Carolina does possess. It's Svechnikov, Teravainen, Aho, that trio. I mean, they dominated pretty much that season series. Svechnikov had 6 points, Teravainen 6 points, Aho had 4. So, I mean, they were kind of lopsided there. Let's look at that kind of dynamic. Brandon, let's start with you. Is this offense, is this pretty even? The top lines and the top 6, they seem to be pretty even. Let's look at the top lines of how they match up.
Yeah, and one part of this I'm really interested to see is if Rod Brind'Amour even puts Aho against the perfection line, or if they obviously go with Jordan Staal and stack that defensive line against them. But Aho's really taken on more of a role as a defensive player this year, really over the last 2 years. But this has probably been his most complete season of his career to me. He's such an underrated superstar in this league to me, just watching him every single night. He's so good at every single facet of the game. And he's a lot like Bergeron in a lot of ways in that regard. Yeah. So that's definitely going to be one of the big deciding factors in the series is which one of those two lines comes out on top.
Yeah, well, it'll depend on who's matched up, like you said, with Jordan Staal and Bergeron's just good all around. And,
Sure.
Scott, that top line, I mean, has driven the offense for the Boston Bruins for like years. And they have been broken up this season. You have, they've put different pieces together and trying to kind of spread the offense around. Do you think that they're going to use that top line mostly in this series, or are they going to try to get away from that? Because Jordan Staal is a pretty good shutdown center. He's been really good this season at doing that. So what do you think?
I think the key could be Jake DeBrusk, believe it or not. And the fact that he's still in a Bruins uniform is kind of a little surprising after the drama that started right after Thanksgiving, with trade request, this and that, being buried on the fourth line. And then all of a sudden, he gets up on the first line with Marchand and Bergeron, and he looks like the 2018-19 DeBrusk that scored 27 goals. I mean, he really took off there on that West Coast road trip, and he's been playing some of his best hockey of his career. And there has been opportunities for Cassidy to break up that second line of Hall, Haula, and Pasternak, but he just won't do it. Jake DeBrusk brings a different dimension right now to the top six. And I think no matter who he's matched up against, I think he's going to make life tough for people. He scored his 25th goal last night. If you had told me on January 1st that Jake DeBrusk would be playing on the first line against the Carolina Hurricanes with 25 goals, I would have taken the odds against that. But here we are, and I really think that the way that first line is gelled, I really think if Marchand ever gets going, he has struggled. If he ever gets going, I think they're going to be a tough matchup.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, we've seen in the past how that line goes in the playoffs. They're usually really good, so don't discount that for sure. Let's move to the defense. Boston bolstered it at the trade deadline with Lindholm, and he's been hurt, I believe. He's been injured as well, so I don't know how much of a factor he'll come into this series. But let's look at the defense overall together with the Hurricanes. Brandon, the defense has been pretty good for the team itself has been really good, but the defense has been good. Some names like Tony DeAngelo has been, kind of revitalized in Carolina from all that stuff that he's dealt with. Slavin's been good. Overall, they've just been a good unit. How do you think that matches up with the Bruins in this series?
Excuse me. So honestly, this is one of the biggest storylines of the postseason to me, because Tony DeAngelo has pretty much been exactly what the Hurricanes wanted, right? He set a record since relocation for points from a defenseman in just 64 games. He's just been that power play one quarterback. He's been awesome offensively, but he's on the top line, and he's really not been great defensively. I mean, that's the book on DeAngelo, right? And you got him playing against Jacob Slavin, and Jacob Slavin, one of the best defensive defensemen in hockey. You want him against top lines. Yeah. But you don't want DeAngelo against top lines. So, a lot of this year, the Hurricanes have used Brett Pesce and Brady Shea, who have been fantastic as well. Yeah. They've used them as their top shutdown pairing. But, to me, it's still just kind of weird to not have your best player, your best asset in that regard, playing in that role, if that makes sense. So it's really going to be fascinating to see, again, like with Jordan Staal or Aho, whoever's going to match up with the perfection line or whoever, what the Hurricanes and Rod Brind'Amour are going to do with their defense. Because, I mean, even Ian Cole on the third pairing has been great all year. Very good defensive, veteran defenseman, won 2 Stanley Cups. It's going to be fascinating to see what exactly Moore decides to do there.
Yeah, it's great to have for him to have, I'm sure. Such a deep defense. Scott, Bruins defense. I mean, I talked about Lindholm. I don't know. I could probably give more insight on that, if he's going to be a factor at all. Overall, the defense has been pretty good, over the years. McAvoy has anchored that for a long time. What do you think the defense kind of matches up with the Hurricanes?
I think the key addition at the trade deadline was definitely Hampus Lindholm. When he's paired with McAvoy, just offensively coming out of the defensive zone, the Bruins have looked like a different team. No matter what line is on the ice, 1 through 4, they just start so much and generate so much opportunities with their offensive skills. I think the Bruins know what they have with McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo Grzelcyk. I think, unlike Carolina, the Bruins are not deep on defense. That third pairing could be exposed, whether it's Derek Forbort or Mike Riley or Connor Clifton, whoever's out there. that third pairing, I would be concerned if I'm the Bruins, because no matter what line you're against, the third line has been an issue. The third pairing on defense has been an issue all year, and despite adding Lindholm, I don't think it really helped the depth on the defense.
Yeah, so I mean, we're looking at defense. Definitely, I think the Hurricanes do have an edge there. Let's move to the goaltending now, and the Bruins. They had Tuukka Rask throughout the year, Linus Ullmark, Jeremy Swayman. Swayman has really emerged as a great young goaltender, and he was really good before, but now I think he's taken over that number one spot. What do you think the goaltending will be like, Scott? Is Swayman, I mean, this is going to be his first playoff experience. What do you think how he'll do?
This is the wild card for the Bruins, because between Ullmark and Swayman, they have one period of playoff experience. Ullmark never made it with Buffalo. Swayman played in the third period last year, Game 5 against the Islanders, when Rask was pulled for game management for the Game 6. Swayman has had a great year despite dealing with the Tuukka Rask coming back. He handled it like a pro, went down to Providence, played well, and then a couple weeks later was back up. They have formed such a great friendship between the two of them. But if I'm a betting man, and I'm going to have a piece out for tomorrow on this, I think Linus Ullmark should get Game 1 over Swayman. I think he's just been the better goalie the last month. In the last week, he beat the Rangers last Saturday, beat the Panthers Tuesday night, and shut out the Sabres Thursday night, and allowed 3 goals in the 3 games. So he's been playing really, really well. I think that's where they go, but I think the biggest wild card for the Bruins is definitely in that, because it's going to be interesting to see what happens with whoever's in there. I do think that they both will play, but it's going to be interesting to see how both handle adversity in the playoffs, especially if it happens down in Carolina in one of the first 2 games on the road.
Well, for sure. Yeah, you say the wild card's going to be Swayman, and I mean, Ullmark too. I mean, they just don't have experience. So, I mean, we've seen in the past, goaltenders, they come into the playoffs and they're really good. It doesn't matter how much experience they get. So, turn to the other side, Brandon, the Carolina Hurricanes goaltending injury issues lately, and Freddie Andersen has been amazing most of the year, but he has been injured in the last few weeks. Do you think what's that going to shake out? I mean, they've had to debut a rookie as well, and even though he looked pretty good, you don't want to have him going into the playoffs. What do you think how that all is going to shake out?
Well, I mean, like Scott said, that's probably one of the biggest wild cards in the series, right? Well, it definitely is for the Hurricanes too, because it's fascinating, because conventional wisdom says, Antti Raanta has been in this league for a decade now, and is a veteran goalie. He's a good goalie. He's been very good this year. The Kochetkov comes up. He has 3 really, really good games, and he's been hurt. Like, he hasn't been playing that much. And there's something to be said for the way the Hurricanes have played in front of Kochetkov is actually, I think, how you're supposed to say it. So I might have messed it up. But I mean, he won all 3 games. He beat the Rangers at Madison Square Garden. He was phenomenal that game. Like, I mean, he gave up 3 goals. 2 of them were in the last 5 minutes when the Hurricanes kind of took a breath and let the Rangers get back in it. And he couldn't have done anything on either one of them. I mean, the kid's seriously talented. He's the future of the Hurricanes between the pipes. With all that said, it's probably going to be Raanta. There's interesting parts to this beyond that too, because it's like Frederik Andersen. He's obviously has these like storylines around him about his postseason struggles with Toronto, yada yada. Yeah. So the Hurricanes want to get him back, and hopefully he's going to overcome some of that stuff. But maybe if he's not playing in the first round. First round. The narratives will be gone by the second round. Who knows? So it'll be interesting to see. I'm really excited to see what Frederik Andersen can do behind this defense. Probably the best defense he's ever had in his career, if we're being honest. So
100%. So to finish this off, let's grab a couple an X factor from each team that could potentially turn a tide in a series. This is like the Fernando Pisani. I always say this is a Fernando Pisani type player that doesn't do much in the regular season. All of a sudden he's scoring in the playoffs like he's a 50-goal scorer. So Scott, we'll start with you. Who's an X factor you could see kind of just coming out of nowhere and being a huge factor in this series?
I think without a doubt the biggest X factor for the Bruins in this series is going to be the third line, because they've always been a 2-line team, and the emergence of the third line after the first of the year when Cassidy put Frederick, Coyle, and Smith together, that's when the Bruins really took off. It gave them three lines to deal with in the game. Charlie Coyle has been a bit more offensive, given them more offensive production this year than I think they thought. He struggled as a second line center, but has really taken off between Frederick and Smith. Craig Smith, the streaky goal scorer. And if Craig Frederick could ever just stay out of the penalty box and not take penalties after the whistle for silly stuff, I think the third line is going to be a factor because they have been a factor in games this year where they've won some games 3-2, 4-3. They've ended up with 2 goals, a game-winning goal. I think their production on the third line is the X factor for the Bruins to have any success.
For sure, we've seen what third lines can do in the playoffs in the past, quite a few times, actually. They've been a huge factor. Tampa Bay Lightning is a recent example. Brandon, what do you think of the Hurricanes? Who could be an X factor in this series, or a line, or anything that could turn the tide?
Well, I hate to kind of cheat here, but I'm kind of going to give you 2 things. First of all, it's just partially because of what Scott was saying a few minutes ago about the Bruins' depth on defense being an issue. On the flip side of that, the Hurricanes' strength offensively, and I don't mean to say that they don't have stars, but their depth has been why they've been such a unit this year. Like the fourth line, even with Jesperi Kotkaniemi, has been fantastic pretty much all year. Jesper Foss, Nino Niederreiter's had a phenomenal season. Like all 4 lines can beat you. So that's a big problem for the Bruins or for any team that doesn't have a lot of depth on defense. But if I was going to pick one player, it would be Seth Jarvis. The 20-year-old has been ridiculous the last few months. Wasn't even really supposed to make the team this year. I think the original idea was to keep him around a little while and send him back to the WHL.
Yeah.
Forced Rod Brendamore's hand, ended up here all year, hit a wall in the middle of the season, and he has come on extremely strong and been elevated up to the top line alongside Sebastian Aho, actually. So if he continues, he's not a big guy, but he's got such a high compete level.
Yeah.
So we're really excited to see him in a playoff series, and I think it's going to be a coming out party for him on a national stage.
Well, we know our editor-in-chief loves Seth Jarvis, so I'm sure he'll like that. I'm sure Dean will like that shout out. So let's finish this off with, I'll ask each of you. We'll start with you, Scott. The Boston Bruins will win this series if
they get production from the third line and the goaltending is better than we expect, then I think it can be. It's gonna be the third line production and goaltending is going to be the key for the Bruins.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens. Brandon, the Carolina Hurricanes will win this series if
they dictate the pace and play to their strengths. I mean, I on paper, I like the Hurricanes better. But in the past, when the Bruins knocked them out of the playoffs, they kind of out-physicaled and got it to be their style of a hockey game. But if the Hurricanes are playing with speed coming through the middle of the ice, getting in on Boston, I think they're going to have a lot of issues.
And that was the problem in the 2 matchups in Boston this year. Bruins had 0 answers for the speed and skill that the Hurricanes had in those 2 games, none whatsoever.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's the problem when you have 4 lines that can just keep coming at you, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We'll see how all that shakes out. So let's finish it. Final predictions for this series. We'll come back to this and see who's right and how close you guys got. So, Scott, what's the final verdict of this series? How many games and who's going to score the series winning goal?
I think this is the 3rd time in 4 years they've played, and the Bruins swept Carolina in 19 and then won in 5 games in the bubble in 2020. The Bruins seem like they've been that bugaboo for Carolina the last couple times in the playoffs. But I just think top to bottom, Carolina is a better team. I think the Bruins will make it a lot more interesting than they did during the regular season. But if I could see, I'm going to go with Carolina in 6. I think a key for the Bruins will be getting a split in the first 2 down in Raleigh. If they can't do that, then I think I can't see them winning 4 out of 5. I think Carolina will. I think it'll be a much different. I think it'll be a different series from when they played this year. But I can't see the Hurricanes losing to the Bruins. Carolina in 6.
All right. Brandon, same question. Prediction. What's the series gonna end up here?
Oh, that's what I was going to say is Carolina in 6, but I don't want to copy him. So, you know what? I think the Bruins are going to push the Hurricanes more than we really expect. And I'll say it goes 7. I think the Bruins might actually draw first blood in the series and maybe, steal one of those games in Carolina, like you said. But at the end of the day, I think the Hurricanes will prove to be a little bit too much for them, if I could talk.
Yeah, well, it's going to be fun. I think this one's going to go longer. I agree. I think it's going to probably go 6 or 7. I looked at the stats. I was surprised how crazy that season series went because I think Boston's a little bit better of a team than what that was reflecting. So we'll see how that all shakes out. It's going to be fun to watch. I think all the series, playoffs is, even though the team I cover is not there, but
the East is just ridiculous all the way around. So, all the series
going to be fun.
Awesome.
Especially the Eastern Conference. My gosh, 100-point teams all the way around. So
there's going to be 4 teams going home in 2 weeks that could easily be playing in the conference final. That's how
100%. So there you have it. Set up that series. Thanks, Brandon and Scott, for coming on and helping to set that up. We'll have more series previews coming down the pipe here in the next few days, a couple days before the playoffs begin. So look out for Brandon and Scott's coverage of this series of the Hockey Writers. They'll be covering it from top to bottom, I'm sure. So keep an eye out for that. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And of course, follow the YouTube channel and subscribe to us here on YouTube. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.